Mountain bikers are a varied breed. There are some of us that have no interest whatsoever in opening up our suspension units. Some of us might be quite comfortable doing a lower leg or an aircan service, but not much else. The next layer is people that are comfortable rebuilding dampers, but the top slice are the suspension experts that tune the suspension to the rigours of the rider and the bike. We're here at Mojo Rising for a real interesting look at what it takes and what goes on inside a suspension tuning workshop. Mountain bike suspension has come a long way, and it's pretty incredible. Now, if you don't believe me, I suggest just Googling mountain bike slow-mo and see how hard the units work as they suspend us to give us both grip and drive. It's pretty incredible. But what if you want to maximize that grip? Obviously, you can tinker around with your spring rate or air pressure, as well as the external adjustments, such as rebound and compression. But what about the next step? To achieve the optimum setup, well, you're going to have to start thinking about changing the internals of the shock. This is a bit of a dark art and takes experience and expertise. For instance, you could be a truly excellent mechanic, but until you've worked on a particular model of bike, you're never really going to know the true nuances of it until it's in front of your very eyes. It's that level of experience that comes into play when you're doing the fine tuning. We sat down with Chris Porter, the head honcho of Mojo Rising, to discuss the basic needs and available refinements of mountain bike suspension. As somebody that runs a suspension workshop, amongst other things, what would your advice to a consumer, to an owner of a high-end mountain bike, on maintaining their shocks?
Yeah, my advice would be, don't do more than you need to do. You know, if everything's working well, and you're happy with the bike and how it's handling, leave it at that. If you think you need more and not happy with the handling, then think about either doing something about it yourself, which is much easier at the front end of the bike, and to a certain extent I'd encourage all customers to learn how to do a lower service at the very least. Yeah. And then the next level above that would be the shock. So I'd say learn how to do the lower servicing to keep everything friction-free and smooth. Do that maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of a year. And maybe when you're sending the rear shock off for a service or a tune, send the forks at the same time. Yeah. You know, don't overdo it.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think when you get into servicing your lower legs, it actually becomes a lot smaller of a job than a lot of people think. It takes, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, when you first do it as a beginner and you first drop the lowers off, you are going to be terrified. Every tool that touches the fork, oh, this thing costs so much, it's going to cost me fortunes when I ruin it. Yeah. And the truth is, it's just nuts and bolts.
But I completely agree. I think, you know, lower legs should be available at most bike shops.
Oh yeah, easy.
I think it's the difference between washing your hair and cutting your hair. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I wouldn't know either.
I don't want to get into my haircuts because they seem to be just a comedy of errors. Yeah. But in terms of going into the more complex dampers, is there any pitfalls of that for the home mechanic?
Of course there are. Just know your limits. When you reach the limit of your understanding, you know you've reached the limit of your understanding, stop. Yeah. You don't guess. Yes. Don't guess. If you don't know what you're doing, stop there. If you're confident, have a go, read a YouTube video. They're very useful, YouTube channels. Others are available, I hear, but yeah. But if you're confident to have a go, have the tools, are good with tools, then, you know, it's not that difficult. Yeah. But know it. Yes. Know you've reached it, and don't have a go. Don't be a have-a-go hero, kids.
Now, we have your bike just behind us. I think we should go over some of the parts and just talk about sort of service intervals and the different things that might wear or kind of be prone to needing a service.
Yeah, that would be quite useful for people, I think.
So if we actually look at, this is your bike in particular, let's look at the problem areas and the issues that might inhibit performance and what would be suitable to do at home and what might be a bigger job.
That's a good idea. So if we start with what the suspension does, what the parts do and don't do, then you can kind of understand what's going to inhibit the performance and what's not. So the job of the suspension is to suspend the rider. There's a spring medium. We've got a spring, we've got an air spring at the front, a coil spring at the rear. All different types of springs are available. But the job of that spring is literally to support the weight of the rider and the sprung portion of the bike. So it just sags into its travel. That's an undamped motion. That supports the weight. The damper has a different job. There's a damper in the fork, there's a damper in the rear shock. That does the job of slowing down the amount of movement that the suspension is doing. With a coil spring, it's difficult to think of a way that that's going to get damaged so we lose performance in a coil spring. In an air shock or an air fork, it's really easy to understand how, if we do a quick service and scratch a sealing air surface accidentally or twist a seal,
or even a seal not going in straight. You see that sometimes.
Twist a seal as it goes in, then we won't have a proper sealing system. We won't have an airtight air spring that will resist and support our weight. We'll just have something that won't work. So at a very basic level, the sliding surfaces and the sealing surfaces for an air spring are really important. Do not go at those.
Not with a file or a little
hammer and chisel, or don't hold them with any tools. These things, those are really important. One of the other things I try and encourage customers and anyone to do is not to think of suspension tuning, as in twiddling these things, as complex. Don't overthink it. If you're going to go out and test another couple of clicks on that, don't think, right, how did that affect it? Was I getting better grip on the off camber? Or don't overthink it. Just say, right, was it better or was it worse?
Yeah. And also, try it.
Definitely try it, because that is so easy to undo. If that was the magic position, there is no magic. This is not the magic position, but it's okay because I can go back like that. It's really simple. So try it. I'd encourage everyone just to try more compression, less compression. Was it better? Was it worse? If it gets better and better and better with more and more compression on the rear damper, let's just suggest, you run out of compression damping adjustments, but you're still wanting to try more, then this is where you think about going to a tuner to say, can you get more physical compression damping into the actual damper before I start using the adjusters?
So what kind of jobs could, any number of suspension centres do? I'm thinking of people sometimes might have play in their forks and never be able to work out where it's come from. But I suppose bushings and things like that is something that you can do here.
Most decent mountain bike shops will do a fork service, but you'll need to do a level up to a suspension centre to get your fork bushings replaced usually. It just requires more tooling and more knowledge is all, which is something that you'd take to a suspension company.
So imagine when you have customers that have quite a kind of a hard problem to solve or something they're a bit of a dead end with. Yeah. Having that dialogue with them, it must be invaluable for
obviously the kind of questions you get asked, it's a huge range, from little ticking noises to, really intricate damping questions. But again, if you're speaking to a suspension company with a few years under the belt, then there'll be normally something in the history of mountain biking that you can remember and go, he's got that kind of, right, okay. So the fix can come from, any number of places. So for a customer to be saying, my shock's making a little noise, really, you need to take that to someone to find
completely,
that.
Yes, completely.
I can't see it, so.
After talking to Chris about not only the option of external adjustment, but also the necessity of experimentation as we try and understand and optimise our bikes, we stepped into a service with Jack to look at the internal adjustments and tuning options.
As you can see now, we start with some 15mm shims effectively just for spacers to make up the distance we've got on the piston bolt. And then we sort of get into our compression and rebound stack. So that there is our rebound.
So now we've taken apart the assembly, well, the shim stacks there, what would be next? What part would you go into next?
So we're just going to continue with the bottom half of the shock. So this is your main seal block. As you can see in there, there's the main seal there, so we can replace that one there. And there's a outside seal, which is just the seal between the seal block and the body, stop any leaks. So we can do that, and we can go further again.
There it goes. I suppose this is where having good quality tools like you would get in a suspension tuning workshop comes in hand. A solid vise, all at hand, you know, you're not rounding anything out. You haven't got it in, you know, you've got some nice kind of soft jaws on there.
So this is just bare eyelet and shaft. There's no seals in this part of the shock now. So that's Loctited in. It hasn't made its way loose. It's not going to make its way loose. So we're happy to leave that. We can clean out all the Loctite at the top of the shaft, just so when we're reapplying the piston bolt, it's going in flush, not cross-threading anything on the way in. The shafts are specific to the clamps, so they're correct diameter, so we know that when we're tightening up any part of the shock, we're using the correct equipment. Not recommended to be bodging.
So when you're doing a service like this, do you inspect seals? Do you replace them irrespective, or?
So with our top tier service, we change all the seals, static and sliding. With the medium tier service, we do sort of sliding seals and inspect the rest. With the sort of lower tier service, sort of revalve, we just do the work, the labour, and inspect the seals as we go along.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because sometimes when people look up their local suspension company to send it away to, sometimes they don't realise the cost includes the seals.
Yeah.
And so they think, oh my God, that's really expensive. But actually, just one set price, and you know everything's going to be done. It's not so bad.
Rebound rod seal changed, piston bolt seal changed, and we're just going to reapply it. So we want the rebound sort of midway in its range, just so the needle drops in and it's not pushed to either side when we're installing it. We're going to be adjusting the compression on this customer shock, so at this point here, this is where I would look into that, get what shims I need ready to go, and then look at what point I'm going to be adjusting the compression. So for example, this customer is looking for more mid to initial stroke support, so I can look at the shims and concentrate on that one area of the shim stack. I clean all the shims up, measure them, make sure that all these shims are good before we start, to make sure the rider wasn't having any problems with damaged shims before we start. And then I would liaise with Chris, for example, or get a drawing and work out where I go next, and then start adding my compression shims in the right area.
You know, you get somebody that's a good rider, out every weekend. Do you think that they would be able to really notice and benefit from a more tailored shim stack?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say if you want to step outside of tunes which are bike specific and get a tune which is better for you as a rider and your riding style, I think someone would definitely, or anyone, any capability of riding, would benefit from having their shock or fork set up more specifically to them. So at this point, you're just sort of picking your way through the shock, replacing seals, and then inspecting parts for damage as well. Next step is going to be to bleed. So you want all the adjusters open to start. We're going to go for the hand bleed. Today, we have got a vacuum machine, which is just there, but a hand bleed, you can physically see the bubbles coming out with the shock. That's going to be better for this. So now we've got oil in both sides, and what you'll see now is when we push the IFP into the reservoir, that oil is then going to be pushed down through the shock, through the high speeds, through the lockout, and then back out into the main tube, and you'll see this oil level rise. So the IFP is as far as it can go, and we're just going to measure from the top of the reservoir to the underside of the head on the bolt, and that's giving us 7 mil.
So then you can quickly...
We go to 12 mil, that's our IFP depth. Drop the shim stack in oil, and we adjust the rebound as well. So what you're doing is moving that rebound rod up and down the shock, pushing any air out through the shim stack.
Nice trick, I've never done that before. That's pretty nice.
So we're just working in the opposite direction. Now we're pushing the oil back through. You'll see the bolt rising, which means the IFP is rising. So that's hand tight, and again, specific tool to be able to torque this up. So we've added compression to the shim stack, more compression. So we're going to go up with the reservoir pressure, only sort of 10 psi, to sort of counteract what we've done to the main piston.
And it comes back to that, yeah, displacement again.
Yeah.
There we have it. That's how to, I suppose, do a custom tune on a shock, you know, with a customer in mind, and make it for somebody, not for everyone, which I think is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for
problem
showing
at
all the nitty gritty. It'd be really, really cool. So there we have it. That was a day inside a suspension tuning workshop. It was pretty cool. I think there are a couple of takeaways. I think one is definitely there's a huge amount of knowledge and maintenance that you can do at home. As Chris was saying earlier on, you know, friction is kind of the #1 enemy. So things like lower leg surface and air can surfaces are absolutely vital. The second big takeaway is that there definitely isn't a one-size-fits-all. Bike designers must have a really hard job speccing certain shock tunes when they know that any range of weight of people could be riding it. And if you think that something isn't quite right, then it's probably worth thinking about sending it to a suspension centre. Something we're very commonly asked is that I might be a heavy rider. Should I ride a coil shock? Well, not necessarily. The coil is just a mechanism that you would use to suspend the rider, but it's not the damping. Something like a firmer compression tune might actually be more beneficial, and that's when you need to send it to the experts. It's been really cool. Super interesting to see all the inner workings of that shock earlier on, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Now, I want you to have a think and get in the comments below. What would you change about your shock? What maintenance do you do? And what would be your advice to yourself if you just started riding mountain bikes? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Cheers, guys.